Red and blue lights chopped the fog into shards as the search line shuffled along Millstone Road. Boots crunching gravel, radios hissing coordinates that kept changing. Flood lamps glared beside the feed store, turning the lot into a harsh stage where every shadow looked guilty. Volunteers held hands out for reflective tape and whispered the same question. How does a child vanish from a town this small? A deputy tried to sound steady. Keep your spacing. Call out anything you see. But his voice wobbled, and the wobble spread. Near a cruiser, a woman in a thin cardigan clutched a little pink sneaker to her chest, knuckles white, eyes fixed on the road as if staring could rewind time. Her husband stood rigid beside her, one hand braced on cold metal. When the sheriff asked for the last place she'd seen her daughter, she didn't answer with an address, she answered with a sound, half sob, half shout, that cut through the wind. Little girl goes missing. Her police dog follows a trail no one expected. The words landed like tomorrow's headline spoken too early, and the air felt thinner for it. Everyone turned to the K-9 unit because that was what you did when helplessness tried to swallow you. A sable German shepherd sat at heel, muscles tight beneath a damp K-9 vest, ears pricked as if he'd been listening to something the humans couldn't hear. His handler, a broad-shouldered veteran with calm eyes, took the scent article without ceremony. A pink hair ribbon sealed in a plastic bag, still smelling faintly of strawberry shampoo. He didn't offer comfort he couldn't guarantee. He just knelt, opened the bag, and let the dog breathe in. The shepherd's nostrils fluttered once, twice. Then his head snapped up so fast the handler's fingers stilled. The dog's gaze locked downwind, past tidy yards and mailboxes, and a low growl rolled from his chest. Not anger, not fear, but a warning. Track, the handler murmured, and released the lead. The shepherd surged forward, and instead of angling toward the creek where everyone expected a kid to wander, instead of pulling toward the wooded path behind the playground, he yanked hard across the road toward the town square and the dark buildings beyond it. Boots scuffed. Flashlights swung. Someone blurted, "That's the wrong way," like the dog had misread the world. The sheriff lifted a hand as if to stop them, hesitation written in his shoulders. The handler didn't flinch. He watched the shepherd's posture, tail level, body sure, nose sweeping low, and saw the certainty of a trained animal catching a thread no one else could see. For a heartbeat, the whole line froze between two ideas, accident and intention. The dog chose for them. Claws scraped asphalt as he dug in and pulled, insisting the danger wasn't out in the woods at all. It was in plain sight. And the first one to understand that was the one with 4 paws and a nose built for truth. In the fog tonight. Hours earlier, Millstone looked like the kind of town people put on postcards and forget could ever bleed. The morning sun warmed the brick storefronts along Main Street, and the diner's door chime kept time with coffee refills and small talk. At Oakview Elementary, pickups spilled onto the sidewalk, kids tugging backpacks, parents calling names, teachers waving from the steps. Lila Harper walked out with careful steps, chin up, a dignity that made grown-ups soften their voices. She was 7, with curious brown eyes and a way of holding her backpack straps like they were important work. A pink hair ribbon kept her curls tamed. She'd tied it herself that morning until it sat just right. Her mother, Marin, waited at the curb with a grocery list and a hand ready to reach for Lila's. "Corner store first," Marin said, and Lila nodded, already looking toward the windows on Main, where wind chimes glittered. They crossed at the painted lines, the crossing guards smiling as if nothing bad had ever happened here. Outside Lawson's Market, a police SUV sat angled into a space, and beside it stood Sergeant Cal Mercer, retired Army, now the town's K-9 handler, talking with the owner. Cal didn't fill space with words. He listened, eyes steady, posture relaxed but alert. At his heels sat Ranger, a sable German shepherd with a black mask and a watchful stillness that made even rowdy kids slow down. Ranger wasn't barking or straining. He was scanning, reading the world the way other people read headlines. Lila paused, not afraid, just fascinated, and Ranger's ears tipped toward her like he'd been waiting. "Hi, Ranger," she whispered, and held out her hand the way Cal had taught kids to do. Palm down, patient. Ranger sniffed once and leaned in, gentle as a promise. Cal's mouth twitched into the smallest smile. "He likes polite introductions," he said. Lila pointed to her backpack where a tiny charm, a silver star tag with her name stamped small, clinked against the zipper pull. "My dad gave me that," she said, "so I don't lose my bag." Cal's gaze flicked to the tag, quick and professional, then back to her face. "Good idea," he said. A delivery truck rumbled past, and Ranger's head turned, eyes narrowing, body going still in a way Cal recognized as a quiet alert. Nothing happened, and a second later, Ranger relaxed. But the moment lingered like a cloud crossing the sun. Marin thanked Cal for keeping an eye on things, and Cal answered with a nod, like protection was duty, not favor. Lila skipped into Lawson's, the bell chiming overhead, and for a few ordinary minutes the world stayed soft. Sun on pavement, paper bags rustling, the smell of apples and soap. Cal watched the street anyway, because calm was when trouble liked to slip in, and Ranger watched with him. Across the street, a man in a gray hoodie lingered by a payphone, pretending to scroll. And Ranger's gaze touched him, then returned to Lila without blinking. By early afternoon, Main Street had filled the way it always did on a weekday. Shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks, teens drifting between the arcade and the diner, parents pushing strollers past the pharmacy windows. Marin and Lila stepped out of Lawson's with a paper bag that smelled like bread and oranges. And Lila walked close, swinging the bag lightly with both hands like it was a treasure. The air had shifted, though, not in a way you could measure. It felt thinner, as if the town had exhaled and forgotten to breathe back in. A breeze carried a metallic tang from somewhere down the block, faint and sharp, like wet pennies. Marin noticed it, frowned, then dismissed it, because small towns taught you to trust the familiar. Lila pointed at the window of the craft store. Glittery hair clips arranged like jewels, and Marin said, 2 minutes, glancing down to check her phone. Across the street, Cal Mercer stood near his SUV, loading training cones into the back, Ranger sitting at heel, still as a statue. Lila's pink ribbon bobbed as she stepped toward the display, and the star tag on her backpack zipper chimed softly. Behind them, the diner door chime rang, then stopped abruptly, cut off mid-note as if someone had slapped a hand over a bell. Marin's eyes lifted, a reflexive shiver traveling up her spine. But the street looked normal. People talking, cars creeping, sunlight catching wind chimes. A sedan idled at the curb in front of the hardware store, engine so quiet it was more vibration than sound, like a predator purring. The driver kept both hands low on the wheel, head angled away. Lila leaned closer to the window, nose nearly touching glass, her reflection bright and unaware. Marin turned to sign a receipt on her phone. Just a swipe, a tap, then looked up to tell Lila to stay close. The space beside her was empty. At first her mind refused the idea, filling the gap with a simple explanation. Lila must have stepped inside the craft store or wandered toward the candy rack at the corner market. "Lila?" Marin called, soft at first, because you didn't want to embarrass your child in public. She scanned left, right. No pink ribbon, no small shoes. The street noise continued, maddeningly normal. Marin's voice sharpened. "Lila!" A couple passing with iced coffees glanced over, then kept moving. A teenager at the bus stop pulled his hoodie tighter and stared at his shoes. The craft store clerk looked up from arranging ribbons, eyes wide for a second, then dropped her gaze to the counter as if looking could make her responsible. Marin's heart began to slam against her ribs, not panic yet. Something colder, a dawning certainty that the world had tilted. She hurried to the craft store tambour, pushed it open. The bell above it chimed. Then again, the sound stuttered and died too fast, as if the mechanism had been dampened. Inside, the aisles were bright and empty of her child. "Did you see a little girl?" Marin asked, breath already fraying. The clerk's mouth opened, closed. I didn't notice," she said, and the lie sat heavy between them. Marin ran back outside, eyes sweeping the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the diner entrance. Someone had to see her, she said to no one, louder now. Desperation edging into anger. A man carrying a toolbox shook his head without meeting her eyes. "Sorry, ma'am." A woman with a baby on her hip turned away as if the scene was contagious. The quiet sedan was gone. In its place, only a faint smear of exhaust and the unsettling feeling that the air was still wrong. Like the town had watched something happen and decided, collectively, to look away. Cal Mercer crossed the street at a brisk walk that never quite looked like running, because panic wasted energy, and he didn't waste anything when it mattered. He clocked Marin's face first. The color drained, eyes wide and fixed on absence. Then the empty space beside her, where a child should have been, and the switch flipped cleanly inside him. "When did you last see her?" he asked, voice level, already crouching to Ranger's side as he unclipped the lead. 30, no, maybe 40 seconds, Marin said, words tumbling over each other. She was right there. Cal held up 2 fingers, not to silence her, but to steady the moment. "Name?" "Lila. Lila Harper." Cal nodded once, committing it. "Clothes?" "Blue jacket, pink ribbon." Her voice cracked on ribbon. Cal was already moving, scanning sight lines like he was back in uniform. Alley mouths, doorways, parked cars, the blind corner by the pharmacy. "Block it," he called to the nearest deputy, pointing. "Nobody leaves Maine without checking in." He turned to the craft store clerk, who had followed Marin outside with hands wringing. "Cameras?" "Yes, inside and out," she said. I can pull." "Do it," Cal said. "Now, don't overwrite anything." He knelt in front of Marin, gentle but firm. "I need something of hers, something she handled today." Marin fumbled in the grocery bag, hands shaking, and produced the pink hair ribbon, damp with sweat from her grip. Cal slid it into a clean evidence bag without ceremony. "This stays with me," he said. Then softer, "You did right." He rose and waved a bystander closer, a man with a delivery vest who looked like he wanted to disappear. "You," Cal said. "Where were you standing?" "By the curb," the man said. "I didn't see—" "Time," Cal cut in. "What time did you stop?" The man glanced at his watch. 2:12. Cal nodded, marking it. He moved with Ranger to the exact spot Marin indicated, crouched, and let the dog sit. "Track," Cal murmured, opening the bag just enough for scent. Ranger inhaled, then went utterly still. No tail wag, no paw scrape. Just a statue with ears canted and eyes hard. The stillness prickled Cal's skin because it wasn't confusion. It was focus sharpened to a blade. A low growl vibrated out of Ranger's chest, not loud enough to draw attention, professional and contained. Cal's jaw set. "That's not a kid wandering," he said to no one and everyone. "That's a pickup." He straightened, eyes sweeping the street again, seeing it differently now. The cut-off door chime, the quiet idle, the way people avoided looking. This was planned. He clipped the lead and gave Ranger a hand signal. "Show me." Ranger rose, nose dropping, body aligning like a compass needle. Before he moved, Cal checked one more thing, his radio. "Dispatch, this is Mercer. Possible abduction targeted. Locked down main and pulled traffic cams within a 4-block radius. Time window 2:10 to 2:12. He paused, listening to the crackle. "Copy." Ranger took a step, then another, muscles coiling. And Cal followed without hesitation, because in moments like this, you trusted training, and you trusted the dog. And you didn't waste time pretending this was anything less than what it was. Ranger pulled straight past the playground route that every nervous mind wanted to believe in. Past the park gate, past the creek trailhead with its muddy footprints and lost ball myths. And that alone made people bristle, because it was easier to search the woods than to admit a child could be taken from the center of town in broad daylight. Cal let the lead slide through his gloved hand, giving Ranger enough room to work. And he watched the dog's nose as if it were a compass. Ranger's head dipped, swung once, then angled sharply toward the courthouse block where the buildings grew older, darker, and more private. Behind them, the sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop, and Sheriff Donnelly climbed out with that practiced, small-town calm that sounded good on paper and failed in emergencies. "Cal," he called, voice carrying. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Kids run off. Happens." Cal didn't stop walking. He just turned his head. "Not like this," he said, tone even. Donnelly caught up, boots clicking, and lowered his voice as if the town itself might hear. "We don't have enough for an abduction. No witness, no vehicle description. We can't light the whole county up over a hunch." Ranger strained harder, and the lead went taut like a live wire. Cal tightened his grip and kept his posture loose, letting the dog's drive stay clean. "This isn't a hunch," Cal said. "He's on scent." Donnelly glanced at the K9, then away, uncomfortable. "All right. But we do this by the book," he insisted. "We start with the creek, the fields, the usual spots. We'll call in volunteers, do a grid. We don't need to scare folks with an Amber Alert," and Cal stopped then, finally, not because he was conceding, but because the moment required a hard line. He faced Donnelly fully, calm eyes like flat water. "With respect, Sheriff, the usual spots is how you lose hours you don't get back." Donnelly's jaw tightened. "I'm not saying no," he said. But his body said control, delay, keep it quiet. A deputy jogged over holding a clipboard, breathless. "Sheriff, I got the missing person form." Donnelly snatched it, flipped through, and Cal saw the corner of the page where the deputy had already written "juvenile runaway" in a neat box, the wrong label that would slow everything downstream. Cal reached out and tapped the form once with a finger. "Change that," he said. The deputy blinked. Donnelly frowned. "Cal, let's not—" "No," Cal cut in, still calm, voice dropping colder. "We're not misfiling this. Not today." The street around them held its breath. People hovered at a distance like this was a theater piece they didn't want to be cast in. Donnelly's folksy veneer cracked just enough to show irritation. "You're getting ahead of yourself," he said. "Stand down, run your dog where I tell you, and let my department handle the rest." Ranger chose that moment to growl again, low, steady, and pulled toward the alley behind the courthouse, the one that led to the old municipal annex that nobody visited unless they had to. Cal followed the dog a step, then another, forcing Donnelly to either follow or publicly drag him back. "Sheriff, Cal said without looking away from Ranger. I've handled panicked crowds and bad actors in worse places than this. The dog is telling us something. And that direction? He nodded toward the annex, where cracked windows stared blankly. That's not a place a child runs off to. Donnelly hesitated, eyes flicking to the annex like it carried a rumor. That building's closed, he muttered. Condemned. Nothing but old storage and paperwork. Cal's expression didn't change. Then we'll clear it in 5 minutes and move on, he said. But if we don't check it because it makes people uncomfortable, we're not doing our jobs. Ranger pull, again, urgent now. Paws scraping concrete as if the scent line had tightened. Cal felt the lead vibrate with the dog's certainty. And he also felt, in the way Donnelly stalled and minimized, the second threat forming. Not just whoever took Lila, but the system that wanted this to stay small, manageable, quiet. Ranger dragged Cal past the courthouse steps and into the narrow alley that smelled of wet brick and old trash, the kind of cut-through locals pretended didn't exist unless they needed to avoid being seen. The noise of Main Street dulled behind them, replaced by the hollow drip of condensation and the distant hum of traffic. Sheriff Donnelly followed with 2 deputies, trying to keep his presence authoritative even as his eyes kept flicking to the shadows. This is a dead end, he muttered, like saying it could make it true. Cal didn't answer. He watched Ranger, ears forward, tail level, nose sweeping low along the seam where pavement met wall. The dog moved with a purpose that didn't match a lost kid's story. It matched pursuit. The alley opened into a backlot fenced with chain link, half hidden behind a sagging "No Trespassing" sign that had faded to gray. Beyond it sat the municipal annex, an old clinic-turned-office building that had been scheduled for renovation for so long it had become a joke. New grants, new plans, always progress. But the windows stayed boarded and the doors stayed locked. Ranger hit the fence line and surged, whining once, then went silent again, as if the scent had intensified. Cal's hand tightened on the lead. "He's on it," he said, voice low. Donnelly hesitated at the gate. "We don't have keys," he said quickly, as if bureaucracy could protect them from whatever waited inside. Cal pointed to the latch. "Cut it," he told the deputy with bolt cutters. Metal snapped, the gate squealed, and the sound echoed off concrete like a warning shot. Ranger shot through the opening and headed straight toward the loading bay at the rear of the annex, where a roll-up door sat half lowered, leaving a dark mouth beneath it. The air here felt colder, stale, and underneath it all was that same faint metallic tang Marin had noticed earlier, stronger now, like a memory you couldn't shake. Cal's gaze tracked the ground, tire marks in dust, scuffs near the bay, a dragline that could have been nothing, until Ranger confirmed it by following it. At the base of the loading bay ramp, Ranger slowed, nose pressed to a patch of concrete that looked oddly damp despite the dry day. The dog's body tightened. He sniffed, circled once, then snapped his head up and growled at the roll-up door. Cal's stomach dropped with a cold, professional certainty. "She was here," he said. Not as guesswork, but as fact. Donnelly's face paled. "How can you know that?" he demanded, but his voice had lost its edge. Cal crouched and touched the damp patch with a gloved fingertip. It was slick, and it smelled faintly of chemicals. Cleaner, solvent, something meant to remove evidence. "Because someone tried to wash it," Cal said. He looked at Ranger again. The dog's nose returned to the ground, sweeping wider now, searching for the continuation of the line. Ranger moved in tight circles, then straightened and pulled toward the corner of the lot where a dumpster sat and a drain ran along the curb. The dog sniffed the drain grate, then jerked back, frustrated, and pawed at the concrete as if the scent had simply vanished into thin air. The lead trembled with his agitation. Cal followed the path with his eyes and saw it too. The trail ran cleanly to the loading bay, then stopped at a sharp, unnatural edge, like someone had cut the world with scissors. "It goes nowhere," a deputy whispered. Cal shook his head. "No," he said. "It goes somewhere someone doesn't want us to follow." Donnelly swallowed hard and tried to regain footing. "Maybe she wandered in and wandered out," he offered, weak now, clinging to the story that required less. Cal stood and faced him, calm but iron underneath. "A 7-year-old didn't come back here alone," he said. "And she didn't bring industrial solvent with her." Ranger let out a short, sharp bark, rare for him, then went still again, staring at the half-lowered door as if daring it to deny what he knew. The question everyone had been afraid to ask finally took shape. Why this building? Why this backlot tied to progress? And who in this town had the knowledge and the nerve to erase a scent trail in the middle of the day? Cal looked at the roll-up door, then at the clean-cut end of the track, and felt the case widen like a crack in glass. The dog was right. That was the problem. In a paneled office on the second floor of Millstone's Development Council building, the air was warm and carefully scented with lemon polish, the kind of manufactured cleanliness meant to suggest order. Outside the tall windows, Main Street looked harmless. Tiny cars, tiny people. A town that believed it was safe because it wanted to. Inside, 3 men sat around a walnut table that had hosted decades of quiet decisions. Budgets, permits, revitalization plans. The oldest of them, Harold Klein, wore his respectability like a pressed suit. Silver hair combed back, cufflinks that caught the light, a smile practiced for ribbon cuttings and prayer breakfasts. Folks called him a pillar. Folks didn't see the weight of his hand when he wanted something. Across from him sat Sheriff Donnelly, hat on his knee like he was here as a courtesy, not because he'd been summoned. The third man, younger, nervous, kept glancing toward the door as if expecting it to burst open. His name was Wyatt Sloan, the town's project manager for the long-stalled annex renovation, the face of progress that never quite arrived. On the table between them sat a sealed envelope, thick and beige, its flap pressed down hard, no return address. Next to it lay a small black flash drive, unmarked, the kind you could lose in a pocket and destroy a life with in a heartbeat. Harold tapped the envelope once, gently, the way a priest might touch a Bible. "We have a situation," he said, voice smooth. Sheriff Donnelly cleared his throat. "It's a missing kid," he said, trying to keep it simple, like naming it would shrink it. "Search is underway." Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A missing child is not, in itself, the situation," he replied. "The situation is optics." Wyatt swallowed. They found the loading bay," he blurted, unable to hold it in. Harold's gaze slid to him, calm and cold. "Lower your voice," he said softly, and Wyatt immediately obeyed, shoulders curling inward. Donnelly shifted in his chair. "Cal Mercer is involved," he said, the name landing with irritation. "He's pushing for an alert. He's pushing hard." Harold leaned back, fingers steepled. "Of course he is," he murmured. "Veterans love procedure when it gives them leverage." He nodded toward the flash drive as if it were the real missing person. "Wyatt," he said, "tell the sheriff what I told you." Wyatt's hands trembled as he reached for a water glass. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he whispered. "We were supposed to be careful." Donnelly's eyes narrowed. "Careful about what?" he demanded. Harold cut in before Wyatt could unravel. "Careful about unnecessary attention," Harold said. "This town has investors watching, grants, state funding. We cannot have headlines implying incompetence or—" He paused, choosing his word like a knife. "Predation." Donnelly stiffened. "Are you saying—" "I am saying nothing," Harold replied. Still polite, still dangerous. "I am saying we control what we can control. We keep people calm. We keep the story contained." He slid the sealed envelope an inch toward Donnelly. "Inside are talking points," he said. "Public safety language. Reassurance. A timeline that doesn't invite questions." Donnelly stared at the envelope like it burned. "You want me to lie?" he said. Harold's smile returned, faint. "I want you to lead," he corrected. "There is a difference. Panic ruins towns faster than crime." Wyatt glanced at the door again, sweat beading at his hairline. "What if Mercer doesn't stop?" he asked, voice cracking. "What if the dog—" Harold's expression hardened, just for a moment. "Then we slow him down," he said. "We question his methods. We remind everyone he's not the sheriff." Donnelly bristled. "He's got people listening to him," he admitted. "He's got that K9. Folks trust dogs." Harold's gaze slid to the flash drive, and for a second his composure looked like restraint, not calm. "That is why this cannot spread," he said, voice dropping to a chill that made the room feel smaller. He reached out, picked up the flash drive between thumb and forefinger, and held it like a match. "If this spreads," Harold said, each word measured, "we're finished." The line landed like ice, and in the quiet that followed, the men could almost hear the town outside continuing to breathe, unaware that somewhere a child's absence had become a problem to manage rather than a life to save. By dusk, the town had split into two versions, the one under floodlights where volunteers searched, and the one in shadow where people closed blinds and pretended they couldn't hear Maren Harper's name on the scanner. Cal parked his SUV at the Harper's curb and walked Ranger up the steps like a sentry, the dog's nails ticking softly on wood. Inside, the living room smelled of panic. Maren stayed on the couch, Lila's pink ribbon in her hands, while Ethan Harper paced at the windows, phone glued to his palm like it could summon miracles. Cal didn't offer speeches. He set a legal pad on the coffee table and started marking a timeline down to the minute, writing 2:10 to 2:12 with a hard straight line under it. "Any calls, texts, strangers? Anything unusual this week?" he said. And Maren tried to answer, voice thin, words catching on guilt. Ranger sat near the front door, ears forward, eyes fixed on the porch steps as if expecting someone to climb them. A cruiser rolled past slow, then slower, and Ranger's head turned, tracking the movement through the blinds until the vehicle disappeared. The stillness that followed felt staged. 10 minutes later, a different car cruised by, dark. Windows too tinted, engine barely audible, and Ranger rose without command, body angled toward the street, throat vibrating with a low warning that made Ethan stop pacing. Cal stepped to the window, lifted one slat, and memorized the taillights. "Don't go outside," he said, calm as an order. The radio on Cal's belt crackled. Then dispatch patched through a batted tip from an anonymous caller, claiming they'd seen a little girl near the creek footbridge, sobbing, headed toward the woods. Ethan lurched for the door. Cal caught his arm. "It's bait," he said, "or it's a mistake designed to cost us time." Ethan stared, furious, desperate. "How can you know?" Cal nodded at Ranger, who had returned to the door and was staring at the jamb, nose hovering near the bottom hinge, as if reading a message written in air. "Because my partner says someone was here," Cal replied. A minute later, Maren found it. A folded note wedged beneath the welcome mat. Plain white paper, no signature. Letters printed in blocky marker as if someone had practiced being anonymous. "Stop making noise, or you'll never see her again." Marin's breath broke into a sound that wasn't a scream, only because she didn't have enough air. Cal photographed the note, bagged it, and wrote the exact time. "Who knew you'd come home?" he asked, and the question chilled the room, because the answer was obvious. Anyone watching? When Ethan tried calling Donnelly again, the line clicked, rang once, then went dead. Across the street, a porch light that had been on all evening snapped off, as if someone had noticed them noticing. Ranger's ears twitched. Then he fixed on the dark yard with laser focus, and Cal felt the siege tighten around the house. At exactly 2:00 a.m., 3 slow knocks sounded on the front door. Cal didn't reach for the knob right away. He watched Ranger, because the dog heard truth before metal turned. Ranger stood rigid beside the door, head high, ears forward. Then his gaze dropped to the gap at the threshold, and his lip lifted in a silent, professional warning. Not a frenzy, a statement. Someone is there, and I don't like why. Cal eased his hand near his holster without drawing, kept his voice level, and called through the wood. "Identify." A woman answered, breathy and sharp with fear. "Sergeant Mercer, please. It's Nina from dispatch. Don't call it in. Don't. Just open the door." Cal cracked it a few inches, chain still latched, porch light washing her face. Late 20s, eyes bloodshot, hair shoved under a beanie, hands shaking so hard her keyring clinked. Ranger's growl deepened, but he didn't lunge. He simply tracked the street behind her, as if measuring the distance to whatever had pushed her here. "You're alone?" Cal asked. Nina swallowed. "I think so," she whispered. "But I've been wrong all night." Cal unchained the door and pulled her inside quickly, closing it with controlled care, then guided her away from the windows. Ethan hovered like a storm cloud. Marin sat frozen, clutching the ribbon. Nina's eyes snagged on that ribbon, and she flinched like it burned. "I can't do this anymore," she blurted. "They told me it was a runaway. They told me to code it wrong. They told me to delay the county alert because it would cause a panic." Cal's expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. "Who is they?" Nina shook her head fast. "Sheriff Donnelly came into the comm room himself. And Harold Klein, he was on the phone, I heard his voice. They kept saying funding and headline and keep it local. Then an hour ago I got an internal call, no caller ID, but it routed through the municipal switchboard. And a man told me to send search units to the creek because a witness saw her there. I did it." Her voice cracked. "I diverted them. I pulled them off your area. And then I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." She dug into her jacket and produced a small black flash drive, unmarked, pinched between 2 trembling fingers, like contraband. "The craft store owner's son helped me pull the exterior camera feed before it got lost. I copied it. I didn't trust the system." Cal took the drive carefully. Like it was evidence in a live grenade. "What's on it?" Nina's throat bobbed. 210, 211. Lila at the window. A dark sedan idling so quiet it barely shows exhaust. The passenger door opens. A man steps out, hood up, grabs her like he's practiced it. Not frantic, efficient. And then she looked at Marin, apology and horror colliding. He carries her across the street, straight toward the municipal annex backlot. The loading bay. The same place Ranger hit. Ethan's breath came out ragged. Marin made a small, broken sound. Cal didn't move for a full beat, because this was the first solid piece of truth they'd touched all night, and he could feel the town's lies trying to smother it. "There's more," Nina whispered. "Keycard logs. I access them because I dispatch the building alarms sometimes. Somebody used an active card at the annex door at 2:13 p.m., after it's supposedly condemned. The card belongs to Wyatt Sloan, the renovation manager." She wiped her face with her sleeve, furious at herself. "I printed the access report and hid it in my locker. They're going to scrub it by morning. I brought the copy." She handed Cal a folded sheet of paper, still warm from her pocket. Ranger, who had been staring at the front door the whole time, suddenly turned his head toward the living room window, ears snapping upright, then fixed on the street with that same unnerving stillness. Cal felt it too. The weight of eyes outside, a presence that didn't need to knock again. The first domino had wobbled, but it hadn't fallen yet, and now the people holding it up would know someone inside had pushed. Cal looked at Ranger, then at Marin, and nodded once. The move was theirs. Cal didn't waste the gift Nina had risked her life to deliver. He made one call to a number he kept for the moments when local lines went rotten. And when the voice on the other end answered with crisp authority, he spoke in the same measured cadence he'd used overseas: facts, timestamps, evidence. "Possible abduction," he said. "Compromised response. Video and access logs tied to municipal annex. Names involved: Sheriff Donnelly, Harold Klein, Wyatt Sloan." A pause, then a reply that felt like oxygen. "Stay where you are. State investigators are en route. Do not engage alone." Dawn was still hours away, but the dominoes began to lean immediately. 2 unmarked SUVs rolled into Millstone before a first light, followed by a state trooper cruiser and an internal affairs sedan. Their arrivals quiet but decisive, like the town had suddenly been placed under a different jurisdiction. The lead investigator, Agent Reyes, stepped into the Harpers' living room with a badge that didn't need permission from Sheriff Donnelly, listened to Cal's timeline, watched Nina's footage on a laptop without blinking, and then looked up with a cold, clear expression. "We're taking over," she said, and the words landed like a rescue line. Within minutes, warrants were drafted and signed by an on-call judge in the next county, the paperwork moving faster than Millstone's comfort ever allowed. By 5:12 a.m., floodlights painted the municipal annex backlot white, and men and women in state jackets fanned out with gloved hands and clipped voices. The roll-up door that had loomed like a mouth was forced open with a metallic shriek, and Rangers surged forward, scenting hard, pulling Cal through stale air that reeked of cleaner and dust. Evidence techs snapped photos, placed numbered markers, bagged the solvent bottle near the drain, then moved deeper, past stacks of broken office chairs and plastic-wrapped renovation materials that had never been used. A locked interior door stopped the team. Ranger's posture changed, head high, breathing fast, a sharp whine that turned into a single bark. Cal raised a hand. "She's behind there," he said, and this time nobody minimized him. The ram hit once, twice. The door burst inward, and the room beyond was dim, the only light a thin strip under a boarded window. Lila sat on the floor with her knees tucked to her chest, blue jacket still on, hair ribbon missing, eyes huge but steady. Shaken, yes, but not broken. She looked up at the sudden invasion of strangers, and fear tried to rise. Then she saw Ranger first, and something in her face softened like a locked door opening. Ranger rushed to her, stopped inches away as if remembering his training, then leaned in and pressed his head gently against her shoulder, the way a protector says, "You're safe now." Lila's small hand found his fur and held on. Marin's cry echoed down the corridor when she arrived, and the moment her daughter's arms wrapped around her, the whole building seemed to exhale. Outside, the accountability machine had already started moving. Wyatt Sloan was taken in cuffs from his house before he could finish pulling on his boots. His face collapsed when he saw the state jackets. Harold Klein was arrested in his office, still wearing a pressed suit, still trying to speak like a pillar until the evidence bags and the camera footage took his voice away. Sheriff Donnelly, confronted with the misfiled report and the diverted units, tried to bluster, then went quiet when Internal Affairs read him his rights. One by one, the town's untouchables became just men under fluorescent lights. By mid-morning, Main Street was crowded again, not with shoppers, but with people standing shoulder to shoulder, watching the truth roll out like a storm front. Some cried. Some stared at the ground in shame. The craft store clerk who'd lied stepped forward and apologized to Marin without excuses, voice trembling. The delivery man who'd looked away brought casseroles to the Harpers' porch and couldn't meet their eyes. Nina, pale but unbroken, gave her statement and accepted the weight of it because courage was heavy and still worth carrying. Days later, repairs began, literal and moral. Broken locks replaced, the annex sealed properly, meetings held in daylight instead of back rooms, and a quiet understanding that safety wasn't a feeling you assumed. It was work you protected. On the first clear morning after the arrests, Cal walked Ranger along Millstone Road as the sun lifted over wet grass, the air finally clean, the fog burned away. The dog's stride was loose again, tail easy, mission complete. Cal glanced toward the Harpers' house where a small pink ribbon now hung on the porch rail like a flag of survival, and he felt the simplest truth settle in his chest. Protect the vulnerable, expose corruption, reward courage. Because justice isn't a miracle. It's a choice, made on purpose, before it's too late.